Okay, let's start with the big questions. What really defines us as humans? I mean, how did we actually get here? And maybe more importantly, where are we headed?
Huge questions.
Right.
Absolutely fundamental.
Right. So today, we're doing a deep dive into that incredible journey of Homo sapiens. We want to explore how we, you know, rose to become the dominant species on the planet.
And the forces shaping us, even now.
Exactly. And the forces that are still shaping our future. For this deep dive, we're digging into a whole stack of sources, including the big one, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind.
It's a fantastic starting point for this kind of exploration.
Our mission here, basically to pull out the most important bits, those key nuggets of knowledge, maybe some surprising facts too. We want to give you a kind of shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about our amazing ongoing story.
And it's really fascinating how these early, seemingly small changes laid the groundwork for, well, everything that followed. This deep dive is all about exploring those pivotal forces, those transformations that shaped our existence.
Connecting the dots, maybe.
Yeah, connecting seemingly separate things to see the patterns, the surprising patterns, that really define what it means to be human today. What's striking is how foundational those early steps were.
Okay, so let's unpack that journey. Starting right at the beginning, right? Our evolution. For like 2 million years, human brains just kept getting bigger and bigger.
A huge increase in size.
But what really gets me is that for most of that time, we didn't have that much to show for it beyond maybe some flint knives and pointed sticks. What was driving that massive brain growth?
It's still one of the big mysteries, isn't it? The
Yeah.
immediate payoff wasn't obvious.
And then there's that other unique thing, walking upright on 2 legs. So strange, really.
Completely changed our perspective,
Yeah.
literally. But you mentioned payoff. One profound shift did happen. A really significant step towards the top. The domestication of fire.
Ah, fire. Yeah.
Yeah. Some human species might have used it occasionally, maybe as far back as 800,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But by about 300,000 years ago, species like Homo erectus, Neanderthals, and our own ancestors, the early Sapiens, were using fire daily.
Daily use. That's a big difference. And it wasn't just about warmth and light, was it? Fire brought a whole host of other benefits. How did mastering fire really change the game?
Oh, it was multifaceted.
Well-
Absolutely. You had a reliable source of light, warmth, obviously, but it was also a deadly weapon against, prowling lions and things.
Protection. Makes sense.
And here's where it gets really clever. They even started deliberately torching thickets, barren land,
Why cure it?
to turn them into prime grasslands, which of course attracted game. And then after the fire died down, these Stone Age entrepreneurs could just walk through the smoking remains.
And harvest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Harvest charcoaled animals, nuts, tubers, whatever was left.
Wow, that's like early environmental engineering.
Mhm.
But I think the biggest game changer for me anyway has to be cooking. What was the real impact of cooking?
Cooking. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. This is the true revelation. Foods that humans just couldn't digest, raw. Think wheat, rice, potatoes suddenly became staples.
Because cooking breaks them down.
Right. Fire changed the food's chemistry, sure, but also its biology. It killed germs, parasites, plus even old favorites like fruits, nuts, insects, maybe carrion. Much easier to chew and digest if cooked.
Easier to process.
Massively. Think about this. Chimpanzees spend about 5 hours a day just chewing raw food. 5 hours.
That's most of their waking life.
Pretty much. But for humans, eating cooked food, just 1 hour suffices.
That is a staggering difference in efficiency. And that ability to cook, it literally reshaped our bodies, didn't it?
It really did. We could eat more kinds of food, spend less time eating, and crucially make do with smaller teeth and shorter intestines.
Shorter intestines.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
Well, some scholars believe there's a direct link here to our big brains. See, long intestines and large brains are both huge energy hogs. It's metabolically expensive to have both.
Oh, okay. Trade-off.
Exactly. So by shortening the intestines through cooking and therefore decreasing their energy needs, cooking inadvertently freed up that energy
Which could then go to
the jumbo brains of Neanderthals and Sapiens. It really raises a question, doesn't it? How did such a simple innovation, cooking, lead to such a profound biological change? A change that also created the first significant gulf between humans and other animals.
That's a powerful idea. It suggests our own ingenuity actually influenced our biology, which makes me wonder, what else set us apart, even from our closest relatives, like Neanderthals? Because, the evidence has really shifted their image lately. They weren't just brutish, cave people, right?
Not at all. They were actually more muscular than sapiens, had larger brains, used tools, used fire. They were good hunters.
So pretty sophisticated.
And more than that, they apparently took care of their sick and infirm. Archaeologists have found Neanderthal bones, individuals who lived for many years with severe physical handicaps.
Unbeads.
It's clear evidence their relatives cared for them, they weren't just left behind. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows how early humans were already creating complex social meanings, hierarchies, things far beyond just biology.
That is fascinating. Completely changes the picture. And we see even more complex social stuff with sapiens, right? Like that burial site in Russia, Sungir, from about 30,000 years ago. What did they find there?
Ah, Sungurs, incredible site, belonged to a mammoth hunting culture. In one grave, they found the skeleton of a man about 50 years old, covered with strings of mammoth ivory beads.
How many?
About 3,000 beads, plus a hat with fox teeth, ivory bracelets. But even more interesting was another tomb. 2 children, buried head to head.
Children.
A boy, maybe 12 or 13, covered with 5,000 ivory beads, and a girl, 9 or 10, with 5,250 beads, surrounded by ivory statues, other objects.
10,000 beads.
Yeah.
Just for 2 kids. How long would that even take to make?
Well, estimates suggest one skilled craftsman would need about 45 minutes per bead. So for 10,000 beads, that's a massive investment of time and labor.
Unbelievable. What does that imply?
It implies a hierarchy that wasn't just biological. It points to a really complex social structure, inherited status perhaps long before agriculture.
Wow. Layers of meaning. Social complexity. Already 30,000 years ago. Now, thinking about sapiens spreading out,
Yeah.
this expansion across the globe, it wasn't exactly peaceful for other species, was it? We got a bit of a reputation.
Yeah, you could say that. It seems Homo sapiens was, in many ways, an ecological serial killer.
Strong words.
But look at Australia. Within just a couple of centuries of humans arriving, most of the local megafauna, the giant animals, were extinct. 60% of all bird species, too. Gone.
And mammoths?
Same story on Wrangel Island up in the Arctic. Mammoths thrived there for ages, then suddenly disappeared about 4,000 years ago, right when the first humans showed up.
So we were efficient, very efficient. But it wasn't just our tools or physical ability that made us so dominant, was it? It was something else, something more abstract.
Exactly, the cognitive revolution. That's the key. It gave sapiens this unique ability to live in, well, you could call it a dual reality.
Dual reality, meaning?
Meaning the objective reality, rivers, trees, lions, the stuff you can touch and see. And then alongside that, an imagined reality.
Like gods, nations, money.
Precisely. Gods, nations, corporations, laws, justice. And this imagined reality isn't just a lie, like a monkey tricking another. It's what some call an intersubjective reality, something that exists purely because enough people collectively believe in it.
And that belief gives it real power in the world.
An enormous power. This ability to create reality out of words. It allowed huge numbers of strangers to cooperate effectively. And it also let sapiens essentially bypass the genome.
Bypass the genome. That sounds important. What does that mean, practically?
It means we could change our behavior really quickly and transmit those new behaviors to the next generation without any genetic change or even waiting for environmental changes. We could just change the story.
Yeah, we see amazing examples of this, right? Like the Catholic priesthood, Buddhist monks, Chinese eunuch officials.
Exactly. These are childless elites. Their very existence flies in the face of natural selection, dominant members of society, willingly giving up procreation.
So how did they persist for centuries?
Not by passing on a celibacy gene, obviously, but by passing on stories, the New Testament, canon law, Buddhist scriptures, imperial edicts. Shared fictions proved incredibly powerful and durable. It's kind of mind-boggling. And think about it on an individual level. Take someone born in Berlin in 1900, living to be 100.
Okay.
She'd experienced the Hohenzollern Empire, the Weimar Republic, the Nazi Third Reich, communist East Germany, and finally, a reunified democratic Germany.
5 completely different systems.
5 totally different socio-political realities, all while her DNA stayed exactly the same. Contrast that with archaic humans, their behavior patterns stayed fixed for tens, even hundreds of thousands of years.
That's a really stark contrast. So this was the key to sapiens' success, this flexibility, while maybe a Neanderthal could win a one-on-one fight.
Right, but in a conflict involving hundreds, Neanderthals didn't stand a chance.
Why not? Why couldn't they cooperate on that scale?
Well, Neanderthals could probably share information. There's a lion by the river, but they likely couldn't tell and revise stories about tribal spirits or imaginary ancestors or national identities.
No shared fiction.
Without that ability to compose fiction, they just couldn't cooperate effectively in large numbers or adapt their social behavior quickly to new challenges. They were stuck with the here and now.
Okay, so that explains our rise.
Mm.
But then comes another massive turning point, the agricultural revolution. Often seen as this great leap forward, but you've called it history's biggest fraud.
Mhm.
That's pretty provocative. Why a fraud?
Well, from the perspective of the average early farmer, it wasn't necessarily a great deal. They didn't foresee the downsides.
Like what?
They didn't realize that having more food, like wheat, would mean more children, so the extra food just got shared among more mouths. They didn't realize feeding kids more porridge and less breast milk weakened immune systems.
Health issues.
Big time. And permanent settlements. Perfect breeding grounds for infectious diseases. Plus, relying heavily on one or two crops made them incredibly vulnerable to drought.
More risk, not less.
And they certainly didn't foresee that those bulging granaries in good years would be a massive temptation for raiders and ruling elites. So, the bottom line for many, you worked harder, your diet was less varied, and you were way more exposed to disease, famine, and exploitation.
It's those unintended consequences again. And maybe part of the problem is scale. We evolved in small bands, right? A few dozen people.
Exactly. For millions of years, those few millennia between starting farming and living in cities and empires, that's just not enough time biologically to evolve an instinct for mass cooperation with thousands of strangers.
So how did we manage it? How did we build cities and empires?
It turns out myths, those shared fictions we talked about, were much stronger than anyone could have guessed. They made it possible for millions of strangers to cooperate day in, day out.
Which led to?
Cities like Çatalhöyük in Turkey, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 people by 7,000 BC. Then the first Egyptian kingdom around 3100 BC, ruling hundreds of thousands. And the Akkadian Empire under Sargon around 2250 BC, over 1 million subjects.
1 million people cooperating, based on shared stories.
If we zoom out, this ability to believe in shared fictions, imagined realities, that's the glue. That's what lets us build these incredibly complex societies far beyond the natural limits of our small biological groups.
And these complex societies, they seem to need something else too. Imagined hierarchies, ways to categorize people.
Yes, things like superiors and commoners, Brahmins and Shudras, rich and poor. These hierarchies, often based on unjust discrimination, allow strangers to know how to interact without having to, get personally acquainted every single time.
Like in Shaw's Pygmalion. Professor Higgins instantly knows Eliza's social standing just from her speech.
Exactly. Or think about a modern florist sizing up customers by how they dress, deciding how much effort to put in. It's a shortcut based on social cues embedded in these hierarchies.
But natural abilities play a role too, surely.
They do, but those abilities are almost always mediated through these imagined hierarchies. Firstly, most abilities need nurturing. Think Harry Potter, he has latent magic but needs Hogwarts to develop it.
Right, talent needs training.
Secondly, even if people from different classes have the exact same abilities, they won't have equal success because the rules of the game are different.
Can you give an example?
Sure. In British-ruled India, imagine an untouchable, a Brahmin, a Catholic Irishman, and a Protestant Englishman, all with identical business smarts. They absolutely would not have had the same chance of becoming rich. The economic game was rigged by the ruling hierarchy.
So the system itself creates inequality, even with equal talent. Which makes you ask, if these hierarchies are imagined, how do they stick around? What keeps them going?
That's the crucial question. Often a hierarchy starts almost by accident, some historical fluke. But then it gets perpetuated, refined over generations, because different groups develop vested interests in maintaining it.
Like the Hindu caste system.
A prime example. It evolved into thousands of different jati groupings, dictating everything: profession, diet, where you lived, who you could marry, deeply entrenched.
And what about gender hierarchy? Patriarchy seems almost universal.
It's incredibly widespread, yes. Now, there are biological differences between men and women, obviously. But societies layer on vast amounts of cultural ideas and norms with very little biological basis.
Like treating women as property or thinking a daughter is a misfortune, as with Lady Howe you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Cultural constructs piled onto biology.
It's interesting how often we use terms like natural or unnatural to justify these things, even when biology doesn't really back it up.
That's a really important point. From a purely biological perspective, nothing is truly unnatural. If something is possible, it's natural. That whole natural versus unnatural framing. It mostly comes from Christian theology, the idea that God designed organs with a specific purpose.
But evolution doesn't work like that.
Evolution has no purpose. Organs evolve for one thing, then get adapted for others. Mouths evolved for eating, right? But we also use them to kiss, to speak. Or, if you're Rambo, to pull grenade pins.
Huh, good point. So back to patriarchy. Why is it so common? Any solid theories?
Honestly, there are theories about muscle power, aggression, evolutionary strategies, but none are fully convincing on their own. We know societies valuing masculine traits over feminine ones tend to give women fewer resources, less power, less freedom, but why this pattern emerged so strongly, it's still a puzzle.
Especially in a species like ours, where cooperation is key to success.
Exactly. Why would the supposedly less cooperative gender end up controlling the more cooperative one? It's a fascinating question. We just don't have a definitive answer for why patriarchy became so widespread.
Okay, let's zoom out again. Look at the really grand sweep of history. There seems to be this general direction, doesn't there? Small cultures gradually merging into bigger, more complex ones. Fewer and fewer mega cultures over time.
It's a broad trend, yeah. Obviously, there are temporary setbacks, empires collapsing like the Mongol Empire breaking up. But overall, the long-term trajectory seems to be towards greater unity, fewer separate worlds.
How can we best appreciate that direction?
Well, one way is just to count the number of separate human worlds coexisting on Earth at different times. For most of history, it was like a whole galaxy of isolated human worlds.
Like Tasmania.
Perfect example. Cut off from mainland Australia for maybe 12,000 years, its people had zero contact with any other humans until Europeans arrived in the 19th century. Or think about the Americas and Afro-Asia before Columbus, entirely separate universes.
And fundamentally, we evolved with this us versus them mentality, right?
Deeply ingrained in most social animals. But sapiens, starting with the cognitive revolution, became different. We started cooperating with strangers, which is weird biologically. Still, there was always a border. Beyond it, them, barbarian.
Until something changed that, broke down those borders.
Right. Until the three great unifiers of humankind emerged: money, empires, and universal religions. These were forces that, for the first time, started to really transcend that basic us versus them division on a massive scale.
Okay, three big unifiers.
Mhm.
Where should we start? Money.
Let's start with money. What's amazing is that its development wasn't really about technology. It was a purely mental revolution.
How so?
It involved creating a new intersubjective reality, something that exists only because we all share the belief in it. Money is basically anything people are willing to use to systematically represent value for exchange.
Like cowrie shells.
Or salt.
Exactly.
Right.
Cowrie shells were used for 4,000 years, still accepted for taxes in British Uganda into the 20th century. Salt, grain, cattle, eventually gold and silver, whose value is also ultimately purely cultural.
So what does money do for us?
It lets us compare values quickly. How many apples is a pair of shoes worth? It makes exchange super easy, and it's a convenient way to store wealth.
It solves huge practical problems, especially for trade. Imagine trying to barter everything. An apple farmer needs shoes. Right. But what if the shoemaker doesn't want apples? What if he wants, I don't know, a divorce settlement involving goats?
Yeah, impossible.
And if you have, say, 1,000 different things being traded, you'd need to know almost 500,000 different exchange rates for barter to work smoothly. Money simplifies all that dramatically.
So how does it actually work? What's the mechanism?
It works by converting matter into mind. It's all based on collective trust. Why are you willing to flip burgers or sell insurance or perform surgery for pieces of colored paper or electronic data?
Because I trust I can use that paper or data to get other things I want.
Exactly. You trust the figments of our collective imagination. Trust is the absolute raw material. Coins help solidify that trust.
How did coins help? When did they appear?
First struck in Lydia, what's now Western Turkey, around 640 BC. They had a standardized weight of precious metal and, crucially, an official mark of authority guaranteeing that weight and purity. That legitimized the trust.
Made it official.
And you couldn't run something like the Roman Empire without coins. Imagine trying to collect taxes and pay legions across Europe and North Africa using barley and wheat. Impossible logistics.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But money. It has a darker side too, right? You mentioned trust, but it's trust in the money, not necessarily the person.
That's the potential downside. Money builds universal trust between strangers, yes, but the trust is invested in the money itself and the impersonal systems backing it, not in other humans or communities or sacred values. We trust the coin, not the stranger holding it.
And that can lead to.
The threat is that it makes the world feel like a cold, heartless marketplace where anything can be bought and sold. Parents selling children into servitude, Christians buying forgiveness slips, knights auctioning their loyalty, ancestral lands sold off to foreigners. History is full of examples where money seems to corrode other values.
Did societies try to fight back against this? Protect things from the market?
Oh, absolutely. Economic history is this constant, delicate dance. People need money to cooperate, but they fear it corrupting human values and relationships. So societies constantly try to build dams, to protect certain spheres, family, religion, honor from being purely market-driven.
So the market doesn't always win.
The idea that the market always prevails is just naive. History shows that warriors, religious fanatics, concerned citizens, they have repeatedly managed to push back, to trounce purely calculating merchants, and even reshape the economy based on non-monetary value.
Okay, so that's money. What about the second unifier? Empires. How do they bring people together?
Empires played a huge role in merging smaller cultures into bigger ones. They did this deliberately by spreading common ideas, institutions, customs, norms.
Why? Just for efficiency.
Partly efficiency, yes. Standardization makes ruling easier, common language, common laws, common currency. But just as important was legitimacy.
Legitimacy. How so?
Empires almost always justified their conquests by claiming they were spreading a superior culture, something that would benefit the conquered people.
Ah, the civilizing mission idea.
Exactly. Whether it was China's mandate of heaven, the Romans bringing peace and justice, the Mauryan Empire spreading Buddhism, or the British shouldering the white man's burden. The narrative was always about uplifting the supposedly backward peoples they conquered.
And did the conquered people eventually buy into this? Did they become part of the imperial culture?
Often, yes. Over time, conquered peoples frequently adopted the language, laws, and customs of the empire. They essentially became us.
Can you give an example?
A classic one is the Arab imperial project after Islam's founding. The diverse peoples they conquered across the Middle East and North Africa gradually adopted the Muslim faith, the Arabic language, and the associated culture. They eventually identified as Arabs, upholding that imperial culture long after the original caliphate collapsed and ethnic Arabs lost direct political control.
Wow, so empires acted as massive cultural melting pots, or maybe assimilation machines. Okay, third unifier. Religion. How did religion help unify humankind?
Religion's key contribution was providing superhuman legitimacy to those fragile, imagined social orders and hierarchies we talked about.
Superhuman legitimacy.
By asserting that laws and social structures weren't just human inventions, but were ordained by an absolute supreme authority by God, or the gods, or the fundamental nature of the cosmos. This placed certain core norms and values beyond challenge, ensuring social stability. What's really key here is how religion anchored these fragile human constructs in something perceived as eternal and absolute.
Right, it makes the rules feel less arbitrary. Now, most ancient religions were local, right?
Yeah.
Tied to specific places or peoples.
Yes, very much so. Polytheistic religions usually involved local deities, local spirits. They weren't typically trying to convert the whole world.
But then came universal religions like Islam and Buddhism.
Exactly. Universal and missionary religions. They believed their truths applied to everyone, everywhere, and felt an obligation, or at least a desire, to spread those beliefs. This is a radically different approach.
And this drive to spread belief. Ironically, it sometimes led to horrific internal conflict, didn't it?
Shockingly so. Here's a stark contrast for you. In the 300 years between Jesus' crucifixion and Emperor Constantine's conversion to Christianity, polytheistic Roman emperors launched maybe 4 general persecutions of Christians. In total, perhaps a few thousand Christians were killed by the Roman state over 3 centuries.
Yeah. Okay. It seems relatively minor compared to later history.
Exactly. Now compare that to the next 1,500 years. Christians slaughtered fellow Christians by the millions over slightly different interpretations of their religion of love and compassion.
Millions.
Think of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France, 1572. Catholic mobs killed between 5,000 and 10,000 Protestant Huguenots in less than 24 hours.
More killed in one day by fellow Christians than by the entire pagan Roman Empire.
Precisely. It's staggering. And connecting this to the bigger picture, it forces us to ask, Why do these shared beliefs, the very things that enable mass cooperation, also seem to fuel such brutal internal conflicts? It's a deep paradox.
A deeply unsettling one. And it seems even within these supposedly unified monotheistic religions, older ideas didn't just disappear, did they? Like dualism.
Right. Dualism, the idea of a cosmic battle between a good god and an evil god, like in Zoroastrianism, was hugely influential. And even within mainstream monotheism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, you see the persistence of powerful evil figures like Satan or the devil.
So the belief in a single, all-powerful good God doesn't quite erase the idea of a powerful opposing force.
It shows the gap between neat theological theories and the messiness of historical reality and popular belief. People often hold contradictory ideas simultaneously.
And can we stretch this definition of religion to include modern ideologies? Things that aren't necessarily about gods.
I think we absolutely can and should. Ideologies like communism, liberalism, nationalism, even free market capitalism, they function very much like religions. They offer a complete worldview, a code of conduct, promises for the future.
Based on what? Natural laws? Human rights?
Exactly. They claim their tenets are based on natural laws, or history's inevitable direction, or inalienable human rights. Think about a typical modern American. They might simultaneously be a fervent nationalist, believing in America's special destiny, a dedicated free market capitalist, believing competition brings prosperity, and a liberal humanist, believing in universal human rights. These are all faith-based systems in a way.
Okay, that sets the stage. Now let's jump forward to the last 500 years or so, the scientific revolution. You describe the change as phenomenal and unprecedented.
Absolutely. The scale of change is just staggering. Imagine a Spanish peasant from 81,000 falling asleep
Right.
and waking up 500 years later in AD 1500, maybe hearing Columbus's sailors in the street. The world would still be broadly familiar: castles, knights, churches, the rhythms of agriculture.
Recognizable.
Now imagine one of Columbus's sailors falling asleep and waking up today, hearing a 21st century smartphone ringtone.
Total shock. Alien world.
He'd be in a world beyond comprehension. He might genuinely ask, is this heaven? Or perhaps hell? The change in the last 500 years dwarfs the change in the previous 500, or maybe even the previous 5,000.
So what was this scientific revolution? Fundamentally, what made it so different?
Well, the truly groundbreaking thing about it, above all, was that it was a revolution of ignorance.
Ignorance, not knowledge.
Yes. The crucial discovery was that humans do not know the answers to their most important questions. This was a radical departure from almost all previous traditions: Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Confucianism, which basically asserted that all the really important stuff was already known, usually contained in ancient scriptures or traditions.
So science starts by saying we don't know.
Exactly. Modern science begins with the admission of ignorance, willingness to admit ignorance. Ignoramus, we do not know.
That's a powerful reframing. So science operates on what, 3 main pillars then?
Pretty much. First, admit ignorance. Second, prioritize observation and mathematics to gain new knowledge, not just relying on old texts.
Empirical evidence.
Right. And third, use that new knowledge to acquire new powers, new capabilities, especially new technologies. The key shift is that modern research takes the insufficiency of old knowledge for granted. When present observation clashes with past tradition, observation wins.
Do you have an example that really highlights the power of this new mathematical observational approach?
Oh, absolutely. The power of statistics is a great one. Back in 1744, 2 Scottish Presbyterian clergymen, Webster and Wallace.
Clergymen doing stats?
Yep. They wanted to set up a pension fund for the widows and orphans of ministers. They used actuarial tables, probability calculations based on birth and death rates,
Okay.
and they predicted the exact amount of capital their fund would have by the year 1765. Their prediction was 58,348.
And the actual amount.
When 1765 arrived, the fund's capital stood at 58,347. They were off by just £1.
That is absolutely incredible. It's like peering into the future using math, not magic. It really makes you ask, what stands out to you about that kind of foresight compared to, say, old prophecies?
It's the precision, the testability, the grounding in observable data, right?
Definitely. And the direct impacts of this whole scientific approach, they're undeniable, aren't they?
Yeah.
Especially in health.
Huge impacts. Average life expectancy worldwide just skyrocketed from maybe 25, 40 years for most of history to around 67 globally now, and 80 or more in developed countries.
And child mortality.
Plummeted. It's hard for us to even grasp how fragile life was. Take King Edward I of England back in the 13th century. Rich, powerful, access to the best medieval care available.
Yeah.
He had 16 children, only 6 of them lived to adulthood, 10 died young. That was typical, even for the elite. Imagine the constant grief.
Unimaginable today, thankfully. Which brings us to, well, the future of life and death. You mentioned Project Gilgamesh.
Yes. Named after the ancient hero who sought immortality. It's basically the modern scientific quest to achieve human immortality.
Amortality, not immortality.
Right. The idea isn't living forever no matter what, but living indefinitely as long as you don't suffer some fatal trauma like being hit by a bus. Basically defeating death from old age and disease.
And is this realistic?
Well, genetic engineers have already doubled the lifespan of C. elegans worms. Nanotechnology experts are working on bionic immune systems, tiny robots in our bloodstream fighting disease, killing cancer cells, maybe even reversing aging processes.
Wow.
Some serious scientists and thinkers predict that by 2050, maybe even earlier, some humans could achieve this kind of immortality. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it represents a truly profound shift in our fundamental relationship with life and death itself.
That would change everything. But here's a critical point. Science can tell us how things work, what exists.
Yes, it describes reality.
But it doesn't tell us what should be, does it?
Right.
It doesn't provide moral values.
Exactly. Science deals with the is, not the ought. It has no pretensions to knowing what the future should look like or what is good or bad. That domain ethics, values, meaning that's still the territory of religions and ideologies. Science gives us power, but not necessarily direction.
A powerful tool, but not a compass. Got it. And this scientific mindset, coupled with that quest for knowledge, it also fueled global exploration and conquest, didn't it?
Absolutely. A key factor in why Europeans specifically ended up conquering much of the globe wasn't necessarily a huge technological lead, at least not initially.
Not just technology. What then?
Think about Admiral Zheng. He's Chinese fleets in the early 15th century. Massive ships, way bigger than Columbus's. They explored the Indian Ocean extensively, but they didn't try to conquer or colonize.
So what was different about the Europeans?
It seems to have been their unique, almost unparalleled and insatiable ambition to explore and conquer, an obsession with the unknown, coupled with a desire to dominate it. Most other great empires expanded more locally into adjacent territories.
Like the Romans taking 400 years to get from Rome to London.
Right, they weren't thinking about sailing directly across the ocean to find new continents to claim. The Europeans developed this relentless drive to map, understand, and ultimately control the entire world.
And that led to some incredibly bold, almost unbelievable conquests, like Cortez in Mexico.
A perfect example. Arrives in 1519 with just a few hundred men against the massive Aztec Empire. But he used knowledge understanding the political situation, the resentment felt by subject peoples towards the Aztecs.
He played them against each other.
Exactly. He strategically captured Emperor Montezuma, then convinced vassal states who hated the Aztecs to join his side. They thought the Spanish would help them throw off the Aztec yoke.
A fatal miscalculation.
Completely. They never imagined the Spanish would just take over themselves. That possibility wasn't even on their radar.
And science actively helped these imperial projects,
Right.
right? It wasn't just ambition.
Oh, definitely. Science served imperialism. Take William Jones, a British judge in India in the late 18th century. He noticed similarities between Sanskrit and European languages, pioneering comparative linguistics.
Why was that useful for empire?
Because the European empires realized that to govern effectively, you had to know your subjects, their languages, their cultures, their laws, their histories. British officers studied Hindu and Muslim law, learned Sanskrit, Urdu, Persian. This deep knowledge allowed them to rule much more effectively, often by exploiting internal divisions or co-opting local elites.
But science was also used for much darker purposes by imperialists, wasn't it? To justify their rule.
Tragically, yes. For decades, scientific racism was mainstream and respectable. Biologists, anthropologists, linguists provided supposed scientific proof that Europeans belonged to a superior race often called the Aryan race.
The whole tall, blonde, blue-eyed master race idea.
That's the one. They argued these Aryans were inherently more rational, more capable, and had laid the foundations of all great cultures. Therefore, they claimed, Europeans had not just the right, but the duty to rule over lesser races.
It's chilling how science was twisted to support that. Thankfully, those ideas are discredited now.
They are anathema in mainstream science today, yes. But the impulse to categorize and rank human groups hasn't entirely disappeared. The battlefront has arguably shifted from biological racism to what some call culturism,
Altruism, meaning,
meaning assertions about the supposed superiority or inferiority of different human groups are now usually framed in terms of cultural differences rather than biological race. It's a more subtle but still potentially discriminatory way of thinking.
okay, looking ahead again, you mentioned biological engineering, replacing natural selection with intelligent design, like Alba, the glowing green rabbit.
Alba is a great, if slightly whimsical, example. She wasn't born that way through random mutation. Scientists deliberately engineered her to fluoresce. She's a product of intelligent design and, yes, a harbinger of what's possible.
So how might this intelligent design reshape humanity? What are the pathways?
There are three main avenues unfolding. First, biological engineering itself. We're already doing it genetically modified crops like frost-resistant potatoes, E. coli engineered to produce biofuel or insulin, cows resistant to mastitis, even pigs made healthier with worm genes, or that mouse with a human ear-shaped cartilage grown on its back.
Right, direct manipulation of biology. What's the second?
Cyborg engineering, merging organic bodies with non-organic parts. We already have simple versions like eyeglasses, pacemakers, cochlear implants, but it's going much further.
Like what?
Think DARPA developing cyborg insects for spying or cyborg sharks for underwater detection. Brain-computer interfaces that allow amputees to control robotic limbs with thought, or even potentially enable direct mind-to-mind communication.
Merging humans and machines.
And the third way? The third path is the engineering of completely non-organic life. Artificial intelligence, sophisticated computer programs that aren't based on organic structures at all.
Okay, these possibilities, biological engineering, cyborgs, AI, they raise huge ethical questions, don't they?
Immense dilemmas. Even people who aren't religious often feel a deep unease about scientists playing God or stepping into nature's shoes. There are fears about creating a split in humanity, genetically enhanced superhumans making serfs of the rest of us, or AI surpassing us entirely.
Where does this all lead? What's the end game, if there is one?
Well, some argue we might be approaching a new kind of singularity, a point in the future where technological change becomes so rapid and profound that all the concepts that currently give meaning to our lives, me, you, men, women, love, hate, might become irrelevant.
Irrelevant.
Because our descendants or our successors might be so radically different from us, perhaps merging with technology or re-engineering their own biology, that they become almost godlike by our standards, more different from us than we are from Neanderthals. Which really makes you ask, what does this all mean for us now, as the very definition of humanity seems poised to change so fundamentally?
That's a lot to process. Let's shift gears for a moment, back to our complex present. Something you might not fully appreciate is just how peaceful this era actually is, relatively speaking.
It's counterintuitive for many, given the news cycle.
Right. We focus on violence, but look at the macro stats. In the year 2000, about 310,000 people died in wars worldwide. Violent crime killed another 520,000. That's 830,000 total.
Okay, a large number,
But compare it. 1.26 million people died in car accidents that same year. And in 2002, 815,000 people committed suicide. Even the year after 9/11, suicide killed more people than war and crime combined.
So statistically, sugar is more dangerous than gunpowder today, as Harari puts it. Why is violence so much lower overall?
A huge factor is the rise of the state. States gradually monopolized violence and suppressed those local feuds, vendettas, and small-scale conflicts that were historically the main source of bloodshed.
More dangerous to live in a stateless society than a state, even a dictatorial one.
Statistically, yes. In medieval Europe, murder rates were maybe 20 to 40 per 100,000 people per year. Today, the global average is around 9. And in stable European states, it's closer to 1 per 100,000.
Wow.
Even in many oppressive dictatorships today, your odds of dying at the hands of another human are lower than they were in many pre-modern tribal societies, like the Wairani or Yanomamo in South America, where anthropological studies found that 25% to 50% of adult men died violently in conflicts.
That's an astonishing statistic. So the state, despite its flaws, has been a major pacifier.
Largely, yes. And since 1945, international violence has also plummeted. Most empires just peacefully dissolved. It's called the imperial retirement. And peace actually came to places like South America and the Arab world in terms of interstate war, even before it fully settled over Europe.
A remarkable shift in a short time. Now let's turn to something even trickier than violence. Happiness. Measuring it historically is incredibly difficult. But there's a common progressive view, right? That as human power and material conditions improve, happiness must inevitably go up too. Is that true?
It seems logical, but the historical record is complicated. We already talked about the agricultural revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Collective human power increased massively. But for the average peasant, life arguably got harder, less happy.
Right. More power for the species, less well-being for the individual, potentially.
And think about the spread of European empires. Huge increase in the collective power of Europeans, but was it good news for the millions of Africans, Asians, and Native Americans whose societies were disrupted or destroyed? Probably not.
So more capability doesn't automatically equal more happiness. How do scientists even try to measure happiness today?
In recent decades, psychologists and biologists have started studying subjective well-being. Basically, asking people how they feel, moments of pleasure, long-term contentment, using questionnaires. Then they try to correlate those self-reports with factors like wealth, health, community ties.
And what do they find? Does money buy happiness?
Well, there is some correlation.
Yeah.
Generally, wealthier people report being happier than poorer people. But it's not a simple one-to-one relationship, especially beyond a certain level of basic comfort.
And what's maybe even more important than objective conditions?
Expectations. This seems crucial. Being satisfied with what you have seems more important for happiness than constantly getting more.
So modern people, despite having way more material comfort, painkillers, entertainment, might actually suffer more from minor pains or inconveniences because our expectations are just so much higher.
That's the argument. Think about medieval peasants. They probably didn't mind being unwashed or having simple food because that was normal, that was expected. They weren't constantly comparing themselves to airbrushed celebrities on Instagram.
Which leads to a potential downside of modern life.
Right. Mass media, the advertising industry. They might be inadvertently depleting the world's reservoirs of contentment by constantly bombarding us with images of something better, constantly raising our expectations. An 18-year-old in a small village 5,000 years ago compared their life to the neighbors. Today, they compare themselves to global superstars. That's a recipe for dissatisfaction.
And then there's the biological view of happiness, right? The idea of chemical happiness.
Yeah, the perspective that our subjective well-being is ultimately governed by our internal biochemistry nerves, neurons, hormones like serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. It's less about external events and more about how our brain chemistry reacts.
Which can lead to some paradoxes, like Daniel Kahneman's Nobel-winning research on child rearing.
Exactly. He found that when parents rated their moment-to-moment experiences, taking care of kids often scored low, lots of changing diapers, dealing with tantrums, just drudgery. But when asked overall, most parents declare their children are their chief source of happiness. This suggests happiness isn't just the sum total of pleasant moments. It's also deeply tied to our sense of meaning and purpose in life, even if pursuing that meaning involves difficult moments.
Fascinating. So it's not just about feeling good, but about living a life you perceive as meaningful.
Precisely.
Mm.
So wrapping this all up,
Mm.
what does this huge journey mean for you personally as you try to navigate your own path and stay well informed? We've covered an incredible amount in this deep dive.
We really have, from fire and imagination.
To money, empires, religion, and then the explosive changes of the scientific revolution, right up to our potentially engineered future and these complex questions about peace and happiness. It's a lot to absorb.
It is. And maybe here's a final thought to chew on. Consider this.
Yeah.
If history teaches us that even our most deeply held values, things like equality, freedom, human rights, are essentially imagined realities, powerful fictions we collectively create. And if our future might involve accelerating intelligent design that could fundamentally alter what it even means to be human, what responsibilities do we have now? How do we shape a future we might not even be able to fully comprehend?
Is progress automatically leading to well-being?
That's the question. Is human well-being the inevitable direction of history? Or is it more like a fragile byproduct, something we have to consciously understand, pursue, and protect amidst all these other powerful forces we've unleashed?
A lot to think about. We really encourage you to reflect on these massive implications for how you see society, technology, history, and maybe your own place within this ongoing, ever-changing story of humankind.